Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today at the FinTech India Live panel discussion. I would love to quickly introduce our esteemed panelists today. The panel with us today shares not just the alma mater, which is, of course, IIT Bombay, but also a deep passion for solving the problem of credit access and penetration in India. Abhishek, we have Abhishek with us today. He's an alumnus of ISB Hyderabad and has been a serial entrepreneur. Very recently, they found a mention in Business World's 40 under 40 list. Abhishek is the founder and CEO at Flexi Loans, a digital lending platform for SMEs. Nalin Agrawal has been a 3 times founder and is currently building SnapMint, which democratizes credit and consumption for Bharat consumers. We also have Vinay with us today, who's the founder of SmartCoin. SmartCoin offers micro loans to India's underserved middle and lower income customers. So would love to hear from all of you. Obviously, you've started with a particular problem statement and product, but how have you built it so far? And what motivated you to really go after this target segment? So Abhishek, would you want to take a crack at that?
Sure. Thanks, Chirag, and thanks everyone for who are attending this session. This is an IIT Bombay boys group at this point of time, but I'm sure there are many more IIT Bombay entrepreneurs who are out there building and solving the problem of credit. So to your question, Chirag, there is. I mean, of course, the need for credit in India is we don't need to speak about it because that's everybody knows that. The under penetration of credit in the country is such that it can have a material impact on the GDP if solved correctly. At Flexi Loans, what we are trying to do is solve this problem for the MSME segment, and this segment is typically the proprietor, the kirana wala, the pharmacy store, the mobile wala that you go to every day, and these people don't have any secured any assets to take a secured loan. They typically have not borrowed in the past very frequently, and so they're also quite thinly present in the bureau files. And so what we're trying to do is build custom underwriting models to solve the need for credit for this segment. And it's really a problem of experience, data science, technology, business models, and everything put together, which we'll talk about later in the session. But what we're trying to do is get financial access at a click for MSMEs in India.
Great. Thanks, Abhishek. Vinay, what about you?
Yeah, so first of all, I would like to thank everyone, FinTech India Live for organizing this session. So at SmartCoin, basically, it's a FinTech platform. We started it 5 years back. It's a FinTech. So I think more or less all the people in this conversation, we are trying to target the underserved segment of the country in terms of serving financial services to them. So SmartCoin vision is to provide financial services to the underserved segment, the middle and the lower income segment, primarily in the country. If you look at that segment, it is underserved across the plethora of financial services, be it insurance, be it pension plans, be it savings instruments, and credit being the top one where they are underserved. And the way we feel that to solve it is data science and technology. So risk-based assessments, underwriting models, which will solve the problem for this segment, which we will dive into deeper later. So we are four co-founders, and I think all of them from IIT Bombay Computer Science. Myself from 2007 batch, Hostel 5. So I was also the football secretary of my hostel. So I was also one of the guys, Abhishek, who used to wake people up in the morning for a crossy run. So it was not just Devu. So the other founders, Rohit, he's my batchmate, IIT Kanpur, Computer Science. He's our CEO. Then we have Jayant. He's also IIT Delhi, Computer Science, 2007 batch. And then we have Amit Chandel, who is our CTO. He's also 2005 Computer Science from IIT Bombay. So that's in short the team. And till date, we are pan-India. We have served across like more than 90% of the pin codes in the country, sitting in a Bangalore office with a team of less than 100 people. Obviously, technology and consumer experience plays a key role there. And till date, we have served around over 5 million customers throughout the country. So yeah, that has been the journey so far.
Great. Good to hear, Vinay. Nalin, over to you. You have one of the most amusing co-founding team stories. So would love to hear how the team sort of came together and what are you building now?
Thanks, man. So, yeah, I mean, we started off sometime. I mean, the idea really came sometime in late 2016. When we were running an ad tech, we were piloting an ad tech platform at that time. So, getting billions of data points from roughly 400 million consumers in India and their browsing behavior patterns. And and at that time we were, using that entire data to really optimize advertising for a lot of e-commerce companies, and Urban Ladder was one of them. And Urban Ladder actually launched EMI on their checkout page and got in Bajaj and some credit cards there to start giving out, I mean, EMI on the checkout. And they said, can you target the right set of consumers with the data that you have? And we did that. And we saw that roughly Urban Ladder saw close to a 25% lift on the consumers reaching the checkout page. But the lift in the number of transactions was zero. We called up 4 to 5 consumers, and what they told us was that we came to the checkout page to see some credit options, but over there are only credit card options, and this is like, it did not really interest us. And at that time, actually, that really excited us as an opportunity. We had just learned about Affirm. One of my colleagues from IIT Bombay itself as Johan, the head of credit there, and and what he told me was that, I mean, Affirm had reached almost 1 million transactions at that time between 2013 and 16. And another company called as Afterpay in Australia had actually gone IPO. So we really love this opportunity. We talked to a couple of guys in HSBC credit cards who we knew there, and they said that, there are close to 200, 250 million odd credit eligible consumers in this country, and only 20 million consumers who actively use credit cards. So the opportunity was massive. We all were from technology backgrounds, big data backgrounds who were running this. We felt excited and saw that this market, this sheer underpenetration in the market is huge. And we decided to enter into the market. It was fairly challenging, but what we soon realized was that the massive underpenetration, especially in the young consumer segment, roughly 24 to 25 years of age, was really very high. Close to 12 to 13 million consumers getting added to the workforce every year. And there is absolutely no credit penetration in this customer segment even today. Even today, if you look at the number of consumers who have credit cards, it's just about 30 to 35 million consumers, and that too less than 20,000 rupees of receivables per month. So, so this is where I mean, we have been serving this entire segment by giving them electronics and lifestyle products on interest-free installments, so that they can make their purchases more affordable, and 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 they can enjoy a better lifestyle, more of an equitable lifestyle that the top 2% or the 3% of the consumers in this country enjoy. They should be able to enjoy a similar equitable lifestyle for their needs, and that is where we are.
Great, Nalin. That was insightful. So moving on, today we have a lot of young, sometimes first-time entrepreneurs who have joined us today on the discussion. So would love to unpack some learnings that you've got along your journeys. So at early stages, team is everything, right? What is something unusual or uncommon that you have done at your respective companies that today has shaped the culture of organization?
Maybe I can start. I mean, you rightly said. I think the team is the first and the foremost thing that any entrepreneur really gets to solving, and it really starts with finding a co-founder, because all said and done, it's a very lonely journey. It's not something that you can do without kind of sounding off ideas every day, without having a healthy discussion about right and wrong, building the right culture. And so setting the foundation really needs two people. And funnily enough, my first venture was when me and my wife tried to do something together, and we realized कि नहीं हो पाएगा. So let's find some other co-founders. And then an ISB batchmate of mine and I started something. And that was the time when international opportunities were really a craze. And so there was an international opportunity that came by, and one of us left for that, and kind of the company winded down. And over time, what I've realized is that every day in India, you would come across a problem. and that problem will need a solution. And being the techies that we are, and being the guys who are kind of trained to be problem solvers, the first phase of problem solving comes very, very quickly. Ye kar sakte hain, wo kar sakte hain, and then we can do this and that. But then taking the plunge would really mean financial isolation, would also mean kind of working with people who you would enjoy, because it's a long run. And four of us started this, all batchmates from from ISB Hyderabad. And so I would say again, agree that co-founders is the first big thing. And I think the second most important aspect of building a company is setting the foundation and the decision principles right. Because at every point of time, there will be 100 things to do. You can go this way and you could go this way also, and there are very different paths to take. So setting up a vision and then rallying the entire organization towards it was an important task, and we failed at it multiple times. I mean, as entrepreneurs who are doing it, we realize that we end up getting too distracted too quickly. And so I was speaking to somebody, and somebody gave me a framework which is very good, and I would like to just say these three words. What is the role of a founder? The role of a founder is to care about the top line, the bottom line, and the direction. Everything else, you can then rally people around it. If as a founder, you're focused on getting the top line right, getting the profitability and the bottom line right, and giving direction to everyone in the company. And that kind of summarized it well, in the sense that, yeah, if I can do these three things well, then chances are I would fail less often than what I've used to in the past.
Great. That was helpful, Abhishek. So moving on now, sort of zooming into, yeah.
Just to add, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
just
sure.
to add to it, see, I feel that not just in early stage, but culture is important throughout the company, whenever you be small or big. But the thing is that when you are small, it will be easier to inculcate that culture in the team, because once you are big, you are Titanic. So it will be very difficult to steer you in the waters. But once you are small, you will be able to inculcate. What happens during the growth is that founders get lost in a lot of things. So one of the tangible things which you can do, not as soon as you have started, but moving forward, is invest in the right human resources who help you as a founder in inculcating that culture. First, decide that culture, the core values, what will be your core values of your company, and then see, as engineers, we often feel that we can do everything. That is a very, very big misconception, which we start, we will do operations also, we will do QA also, and we will do UX also, and we will also build the app and the website. So, but that is, it does help initially when you are actually proving your concept. But when moving forward, as your ship is growing bigger, from a boat, you're moving to a steamer boat, and then you're moving to a Titanic. So in the middle stages, it is important to actually fix those core values and get a human resource person who actually helps you is in inculcating that core values and enforcing that throughout the team. Because over time, as you are scaling up, it will start getting lost somewhere in the journey. So, to give one, and just to give, so that is one. Other one which I want to add, that, and it is not uncommon, is what we did with one of our teams is that we start with one of our teams. It is not true for all the teams. We started showing the performances in a very dynamic way and in the public way. Like everybody can see their performance in somewhere in a leaderboard. It's a very common concept from the games. It helps us in two ways. Firstly, the top performers were really motivated. Like we are doing something. So that is a motivation level. Also, low performers had to look up something. Rather than having in a 3-month or a 4-month appraisal cycle, when you tell them, okay, you did not do well, they can proactively react to their performance early in the cycle. Looking at their performance and also understand that from whom do I have to learn my performance. So that helped us. Of course, it is not true for very subjective teams, but where you have objective outputs, it really helps and drives the whole team forward in an efficient way. Just my 2 pointers on this.
Got it. Great. So now zooming it into fintech and lending, right? So lending startups are very close to my heart here at Kalari as well, and I think they're very special because unlike other consumer internet companies, you can't blitz scale this. You are not looking for those year-on-year loan book growth rates, really, right? So what are some hard-earned lessons, specifically building in the credit market that you have had, and looking back, if there were some things that you would do differently? What are some of those lessons?
I think it really depends upon your business model that you say whether you would blitzscale or not. Because, I mean, if I look at some of the companies in the market, right? If I look at there's Branch in US, there is Tala, there is Afterpay for that matter. Each of these companies have blitzscale. If you look at Afterpay, for example, that the company founded in 2015 odd, went IPO in 2016, has gone to 20 million consumers in like less than 5 years. Uh, on the other hand, if you look at the companies like say an HDFC Home Loans, right, where reaching even crossing a million consumers would have probably taken them more than 30 years. So it's essentially the business model that you're working with. Afterpay, for example, they work on extremely short tenure loans, very quick credit cycles. They rotate the capital quite fast. And for them, the blitzscaling is all about, can you get to 20 million consumers? Can you get to an X number of merchants for that matter, for example? Or Branch, how many more consumers can you get to very quickly? So these companies have landed up blitzscaling. But on the other hand, if you look at some of the other companies that you say, okay, if you say you want to blitzscale on the AUM, okay, that's possibly a wrong question, because in what you're saying is that it's like a manufacturing piece, right? It's a very large asset, and you got to, there got to be risk associated with putting that asset and growing that. So it really depends on the business model where you're operating, the kind of consumers that you're going after, and what do you really define as blitzscaling? Is it about growing the book? Is it about growing the consumers? It is about growing the top line, or is it? So if you're working on those high margin segments, if you're working on those high margin, low tenure, very quick rotation kind of credit cycles, you can blitzscale.
I first of all, Indian credit landscape is just it is unimaginably large market, but extremely complex. With the kind of governance structures that we have around bad behaviors of loan repayments, there is absolutely nothing. When you're talking about, the worst you can do is really report it in a bureau. What else could you do? And and that's why I say that lending in India is like a chakravyuh. You can go in very easily, but coming out healthy and safe is extremely difficult. Because in term loans specifically, which is the need of the market, you could nobody. The 21-day credit that Afterpay and what Nalin mentioned, those kind of products, absolutely. Once they gain some popularity, and there could be some short-term cycles going in, and that I think is also the future of credit in many senses. But otherwise, the profitability for a lender is the last EMI. Let's say I give a 12-month loan. 11 months is my principal. Or the 12th month, and partially that is going to be my profit. So I can very easily grow my AUM. But look at the bottom line and look at the NPAs, and then we'll talk about it 24 months later whether that's a good AUM or not. And secondly, also, while there is digital savviness, the digital savviness is not really to the extent, or we are still making the customer work very hard to get a loan, while a lot of innovation has happened. But imagine you try taking a home loan today, you will realize that it's a broken process. Of course, there's account aggregators coming in, there's OKIDs coming in, and there is eKYC, but there's so much broken process today that it's impossible. And we talk about this alternate database underwriting. Honestly, if there is somebody who's building a book in India based on alternate database underwriting, I'd be very, very surprised and highly respectful, because that kind of data alone, of course, you can throw in bureau and you can throw in banking, and then you have 5 variables for alternate data. That's a very different concept. And so the data opacity, the process inefficiencies, the macro cycles. We've seen 4 macro cycles in the last 4 years. Typically, macro cycle used to be 2008 mein recession aaya tha, next kab aayega pata nahi. Now, we started the company in 2016, and there's GST, then there's demonetization, then there's IL&FS crisis, and now there's COVID. So we are probably born in the mid of crisis every year. And that's why I think this industry will move towards a different kind of credit. Of course, we'll talk about it later in the panel, but I think the future of credit is going to be very different from what it is today.
Yeah, I think it's a good segue to understand If you take a longitudinal view, 5-10 years out, how do you think of the future of credit in India?
Well, here Vinay.
Hello, can you come again? The question?
Yeah, sure. So if you take a longitudinal view, 5-10 years out, how do you look at the future of credit in India?
So I think what I feel that credit has two parts. One is risk and the other is collections. And uh, being so any lending company has to focus on both. They cannot just have alternate data to lend, and collection will be done by somebody else. So definitely the team has to be, and the structure of the team has to be to focus on both of these aspects, which are equally important. Uh, Future of credit, I think credit over API will be a key aspect. I think if because well, I've seen a lot of companies who are generating data, and I'm sure somewhere in the backlog of the presentation there will be a line saying that we will earn revenue by doing lending, uh, which may be true in future, but basically credit is not just using data and giving it to the customer. It is also understanding the risk exposure, how much you are going to expose yourself in different cities of the country, in different segments of the country. What will be your debt structure while you are doing the lending? What will be your collection mechanisms? How much of cost you're going to incur on the collection? So I remember, I think somebody said that credit is just a feature in a product, but it is not just a feature in the product, because I can clearly quote examples like Bajaj Finance, Bajaj Finserv, who have built such a huge company just on top of credit. Obviously, they're doing a lot of things other, but they have built such a huge company. It is not just a feature; it's a whole this whole thing which I just mentioned, and that whole thing over an API, which is what some companies will come up, technology companies, and that will help other data generating companies to take help from.
I think in terms of credit, I mean, I can talk from the consumer's point of view. So the way I look at it is that, imagine that, you have gone out shopping, okay, a few years in the future, and you enter, say, a Shopper Stop. Imagine that you trust your financial system completely, and before you enter into the shop, you know how much you can afford to buy, you know what your cash flows are like, and in fact, to the extent that when you are actually completed your purchase, the system really knows that what is the right instrument for you to optimize for your rewards, affordability, and cost. For example, the instrument chosen should be in such a way that that instrument does not have any late charges, it does not have bounce charges. You've made that purchase for a 3-month say installment and earn 50 reward points, versus for some other consumer it could be that the system has chosen a membership reward point to actually make that particular purchase. And when you walk out, you didn't even have to think that what instrument has been used. The system has automatically made the transaction for you when you walked out. And you're rest assured after all this that the system has not taken any advantage of you. You've trusted that system in such a way that the system has been working for you. The financial parties at the back end have been working for you, while you have enjoyed the entire shopping experience. And in the end, payment and credit essentially has become invisible to to the consumer, while you are enjoying life the way you really need to. And that is where I think the entire fintech ecosystem needs to keep building for, is that every person in this country should have access to a lot of these financial products and instruments in the end, so that first they are able to make those choices, they are able to trust the entire financial system with those choices, and slowly and steadily the system actually becomes that good that you have to stop worrying about a lot of these credit and payments and things, and the financial system keeps working at the back end for you.
I think that Narendra is a really important point. Even I was listening to that morning session from Apurva, the country the head for JP Morgan, and he quoted a very important phrase that AI is actually solving the problem of trust, and that is what it is exactly. Because I can detail out later also in the discussion, but I think trust is a very key factor. How you can make the customer trust you to avail your services.
Yeah, and I think in the short term also a lot of unbundling will happen. We're almost seeing that the capital providers like banks, the risk takers who are in the form of data custodians, and of course collections will have to go hand in hand with risk, as when I mentioned. But there's also one key trend emerging, which is I think the credit terms are becoming shorter and shorter. And I think it's also a resultant of the fact that we are working with the resources that we have. We don't still have resources to predict long-term credit behaviors in the case of an unsecured asset, unsecured loan. So when talking about home loans and secured assets and equipment loans, you know that there is an asset behind it. But otherwise, and Afterpay is a great example that Nalin took. They don't even call it a loan, and that's the beauty of it, right? It's effectively converting your shopping into 4 equal installments at the very basic of it. So it's not a credit card. They're not doing KYCs. They're not doing any OSVs. They're effectively just helping you manage your debt better. And that's the beauty of it. I think India needs such products in every, whether it's consumers or SMEs. Today, a distributor gives a 21-day loan to a retailer to buy the product. But if somebody was to go direct to retailer, they'll have to infuse credit within their trade. Now, how to infuse a 21-day credit within the trade, but not really call it a loan, because that's otherwise you're just killing the whole momentum. You're not going to do a 20,000 rupee call it a loan for a 20,000 rupee and a 200 rupee outcome at the end of it. And so I think that part of the landscape will move very quickly to move to short-term fee-based, and I'm not going to even call it a loan. Short-term fee-based, some kind of debt instruments will come in, which will effectively solve a lot of this problem for the SMEs, at least where I'm talking about. And of course, consumers also, it will play the same game.
Great. So I think across these threads of having a solid underwriting or having SME or customer convenience, I think one common layer is having a solid technology and data science layer that will undercut all of this, right? So would love to hear what are you doing in your respective organizations today to be able to build towards that journey. Right?
So data science actually is just a tool. I think there are 2 problems which we are trying to solve. I think all of us are trying to solve. Number 1 is we are trying to solve a chicken and egg problem. I will try to explain what the chicken and what the egg is here. Basically, the core problem is the problem of trust. And in fact, I have been a shopkeeper myself. I used to run a very small shop in my hometown with my uncle. And the important piece of that shop was that it was also seasonal. It used to run only a few months of the year. And that makes the problem even more complex. And now imagine a guy who doesn't even have a shop and he's just coming on a bicycle and selling you note copies or glue, those handmade products. So that guy doesn't even have a shop. The problem is even more complex for that guy. Now, what is the problem? The problem is that, like when I was doing it, there was no data generation. Absolutely no data generation. It was all cash based and trust based between the local lender, the pawnbroker, right? Now, obviously, this all and as Mr. Nandan sir also said that the lending companies will have to move away from asset based lending to transaction based lending. And so transactions were not there. They were there, but not on paper or not digitally. Digitally, were not there. With the whole Aadhaar India stack and the UPI, that those transactions have all of a sudden started, not all of a sudden, gradually over the last few years, they have started appearing in the digital mode. And and now talking about the people, even when I board a Uber car in Bangalore, that's a tier 1 city, the guy first thing asks me is that, can you change the payment mode to cash? Even when I get an Urban Clap guy to my home to do something, to give me a service, that guy again asked me that, can you change the payment mode to cash? So there is still a trust issue that people that they do not want. They want the money in their hand. They want the asset in their hand as soon as possible. So there is a trust issue in the ecosystem, and the Aadhaar India stack, the UPI transactions is solving that trust issue. Now imagine an auto driver in a three-tier city of the country. Like he must have a QR code stamped on his auto front screen, right? And he might be getting a couple of 3 or 4 transactions in a day through that from those adamant customers that, okay, I'm not going to give you cash. But still, there is a lot of cash going on throughout that day. So now what I have really is a sneak peek into his income. I don't have his income, I don't have his financial data, but I have a sneak peek. Now I want to multiply that sneak peek of that auto driver across 1,000 auto drivers in the country, right? When I multiply that and then I use a magnifying glass to view the income, that is what data science and machine learning is doing for me. So it's actually a sophisticated magnifying glass over the. So imagine a situation where everything is digital. People trust the banks with their money. They want to every transaction is digital because they will do it. People will do it digitally because they trust the system, and because they will do it digitally, the banks and the institutions will also trust them back by giving them loans. So there is a chicken and egg problem which is happening, but data science solves it by whatever data is available, using that data and trying to give credit to the customer or lend or provide in general financial services to the customer, thereby gaining trust of the customer. And once the customer trusts us, he will come back and he will start doing those transactions, or he will again trust you back in providing those digital footprint. So I think that is what, in short, what data science and machine learning does for, in fact, all of us.
Just, apart from the underwriting pieces that when I mentioned, I also think that there's a very big use of computer vision technologies in the current landscape of the credit space in India, because what happens is a lot of image and document data which is not machine readable or not inferable in some sense. And which is where a lot of inefficiency lies when it comes to traditional institutions trying to process this. Simple examples. Today when a customer, let's say, sends you 25 documents over an email, somebody has to manually sift through them and see, acha, ye PAN card hai, ye Aadhaar card hai, ye bank statement hai, ye GST certificate hai, ye shop establishment certificate hai. Shop establishment for 25 states is 25 different formats. Some are in local language, some are in English, and so on. And so there's this massive complexity of handling 1 lakh documents a day at scale. How do you do that? And that's where I think a lot of what at least what we are observing is immense amount of data science application on the computer vision side rather than on the underwriting side, for the right reasons that when I mentioned, that the data is still not enough to actually build cool AI-based or ML-based underwriting models. But that's one. And then I think there will be situations in future when you will be able to marry hardware and software and say, okay, can we combine images taken from a drone, process it using computer vision, and do an automated CPV or a verification whether the business exists or not. So there will be such applications, which is where I think data science will play an important role in ironing out efficiencies in the current lending process. But today, I think when people talk about data science and lending, they assume underwriting. And no, fintech has been there for 5 years, less than 5 years. There's no way they can compete with a bank who's been there for 100 years and collecting all of that data in whatever form and shape. And I also see very little investment happening in the data science space within the fintech verticals. There's focus on technology, there's focus on some bit of risk and collections, but the whole concept of using data science to give a superior customer experience, not just a risk part, the customer experience, I think it's still missing to a large extent.
So one more thing which I think I forgot to add. So that was the problem one, and also adding to what Abhishek said in terms of vision, the second and the more important problem, especially in digital lending space with everything is digital, is fraud. And that is where the data science comes into picture, where it actually identifies the fraud patterns using the transactions. Because if fraud scales up, then your genuine customers end up taking the hit. But so that is also where data science and machine learning helps to understand the fraud patterns in your system, and also vision. Like fraud happens multiple ways in terms of transactions. It also happens in terms of KYC forging in documents, like impersonification of another customer. So identifying those things and making a good fraud engine, there also data science plays a key role, especially early in the cycle of a company. Because if early in the cycle you get into fraud, I think you will have a lot on your plate.
In fact, for those who are watching, there should be I'll float a nice problem statement. If somebody here who's interested in data science could write up a draft algorithm, I would love to speak to them later, where you take the photo of or the video of a shop starting from outside going all the way to inside, and you can capture a series of images, and you can essentially tell me what's the business name, what's the lat long, does a person use a POS machine or not, how many QR codes are in their shop, what is the value of their stock, and what is it that they sell. If you could do that, effectively you've eliminated the entire form that the customer has to fill and the entire underwriting that I have to do, and a lot of metadata can be captured. Easy to say, of course, very difficult to build, but I just thought we'll float a problem statement for the audience to kind of have some food for thought.
Great, interesting. So one thing would love to address is the pandemic, right? It has been kind to startups in certain sectors and not so kind to some others. And then lending is one such, right? So what have you seen in terms of the pandemic behavior over the last 6 to 12 months? And in your respective startups, what is something that you had to sort of say, do a pivot, maneuver things at the last minute, etc.? And how do you look at the next 6 to 12 months going forward, coming out of it?
I think for
sorry, Naveen, go ahead.
Sure. I think for us, we are primarily consumption led with very short tenure loans. So, for us, yes, the first couple of months of the pandemic were difficult in the sense that, suddenly people did not really know how to make the payments. Purchasing patterns had dropped off like anything. People, because of lockdown, it was getting very difficult to ship the products, which is really our core business, which is consumption. So navigating those initial 2 or 3 months was challenging. But after that, since the economy then started picking up, and we serve close to about 1,900 cities now in India. So the things were able to pick up extremely fast. The NPAs obviously doubled, but they were not like that high. And you were able to manage things. Especially, what happened was that there were troubles. There were a lot of troubles in the entire logistics area, where a lot of merchants, and merchants who used to ship products for us to the consumers, a lot of merchants started having working capital issues, and that kind of delayed a lot of different product segments that consumers could buy or even get delivered, even in the online space. So this was in general what our experience during the entire pandemic was. Now, at least, things are have come back to normal quite a bit, but still, yeah, there's still a long way to go, at least in terms of the supply chain perspective.
Vinay, you were saying something?
Yeah, so like a lot of digital lending players, in the initial time was really uncertain. So I think kind of the lending operations were paused. But as things became more certain, and we had more data around opening of economies across different tiers in the cities, we started with our repeat customers, lending to the repeat customers. Even in the repeat, it's a gradation, like to the good repeat customers, and slowly moving on to the not so like on the lower scale. Okay. Recently, I think in the last 2 quarters, we have also scaled up the new customers. As Nalin said, the economy is going back up. We are seeing good traction from the market. So 2 key things I think which this test is your collection metal. It's a test of your collections. Obviously, you have a book. Now you have to divide your customer base into 2 parts. Mainly, obviously, you have fraud in the system, and then you have genuine customers in the system. And this lockdown and pandemic results in income loss, or at least income loss, or complete elimination of the income for people. Now you have to map that with general India's data, that okay, where the income has, which cities the activity has resumed. And because in collections, if the customer is genuine, you cannot just go and ask him for money every day. You have to be patient there, and you have to understand that when to ask for the money. And you have to understand whether the income has come back or not, whether the shop has opened or not, which kind of shop the customer owns in a 3-tier city. Is it a grocery shop, or is it a clothing or apparel shop? So we cannot, if it's a clothing or apparel shop in the lockdown times, obviously you cannot just go and pay him. He's already burdened with so much of economy loss personally. So you have to scale down, scale up your collections depending on how the economy is opening, and you have to keep engaged with the customer. Like, okay, you have to provide, depending on which city, which kind of segment the customer is, what kind of business he's doing. You have to tone down your collection or tone up your collection, and give customized plans to these customers. Okay, you can pay in these many installments. Okay, but keep engaged, like remain engaged with us.
In fact, yeah, we hired more collections guys than engineers in the last 12 months. So clearly, collections was a focus for every lending organization.
It is a well said saying that engineers work to make themselves redundant.
Correct. True. And the other thing we're observing is, and this is from this quarter particularly, is that there is a lot of the customers who survived the pandemic in terms of their cash flows. They went probably 30% down, 50% down, and came back up. And people who've taken moratorium, not restructured their loans, but people who've taken moratorium, there is a little bit of what we are sensing is a awareness of over leveraging. People don't want to take high interest loans. People don't want to take more money than what they need. While it's very early days, but we are seeing a slight increase in the number of customers who would decline the offer that we are giving and rather ask for a lower amount. Now, that's typically unheard of in credit. People want more, people don't want less. People are also talking about the fact that how can they bring their interest rates down? What else can they give us? Can they give people are asking for the fact that can I give some security to bring the interest rates down? Because, and I think it all goes down to the fact that people have looked at their balance sheets, people have looked at some really difficult times and said that if this is the bare minimum or the bare maximum I can actually afford to pay as an EMI, so let me not over leverage myself, which is a good sign. Also, I believe that let's say the second wave doesn't hit as dramatically as the first one, then we'll be looking at a better set of portfolios being formed in the next 12 to 24 months. And that's purely because customers who have survived the pandemic will effectively, there's nothing worse that can happen to them. And hence early results again, but the portfolio that we've created in, for example, the cohorts of November and December are very good compared to the same November and December looked at 3 months later from 2019 to 2020. So without the impact of COVID also, we are seeing some early indications of a good portfolio being formed. And this March is going to be our biggest in the history of Flexi loans in terms of the momentum. So we can clearly see some demand coming back.
Great. That's good to hear, and a lot of practical advice as well for the entrepreneurs on the call. So moving on to IIT Bombay, it's serendipity that for IIT Bombay boys could gather on a platform and an event like this. But just like how we like to ask the teams internally, right? How does this scale? So how do we sort of come together as a community and then do more so that we can become the flag bearers for fintech going forward and create an ecosystem where everybody wins? So open thoughts, anything that you guys have to offer.
So I think basically, the IIT Bombay forum can help bridge the gap between, like, it can bring everyone together, right? Right now, as basically the comfort factor is more towards, say, your own batchmates or a year senior to you, or your own hostel mates. Even in hostel also your own wingmates, and then or two years plus minus wingmates, right? Now that is the kind of sphere which you are in. The comfort sphere is that I will call it a comfort sphere for you. Though where the IIT Bombay Alumni Association or the FinTech Forum can help is enlarge this sphere. Like, how can this is a sphere of comfort? How can the other spheres come in close contact and like provide them a common platform?
I also think that I think as a community, what IIT Bombay offers is extreme amount of talent and ability to do problem solving, and a very rich history of entrepreneurs coming out of the campus. This applies to almost every sector that we can think of. But since we're talking about fintech, I mean, the way I would like to put it is key. This is Chingari, but the mashal should go on. So, where does this end today at the event, or does this continue into a point where in the next batch there is a stream of students who are looking at fintech as a career, going into internships, doing projects, alumni going into the campus and talking about what fintech has to offer, and similarly edutech, and similarly e-commerce and multiple other spaces. But today what happens is typically and I'm sure Nalin and Vinay would also have their experiences, but when we try to engage with the IIT Bombay community later on, it's mostly on a personal network basis, as what Vinay said. But there is no fundamental systemic way to engage with the larger community. And it's even difficult to do a simple job posting sometimes. And to the point that how do you take a first year batch and right from that day keep telling them about what are the different things they could do if they could join food tech, if they could join fintech, because all of you would agree third year tak humko pata hi nahi hota tha ki karna kya hai. And that has to change. Typically people end up doing an MBA later is because they want that day a constant kind of validation of their ideas and constant discovery mode. We don't discover so much in the first couple of years. We are also new to the campus, and so anything we can do as alumni to educate and put that information out to the current batch, that's one. And second is also as an institution, how many such forums are there? Are there I mean, right from Nandan to somebody who's created a company yesterday, there are probably hundreds of people who bring so much knowledge from a fintech perspective. How do you? I mean, this event is typically a one-day event, but how do you translate that into a academic as well as an industry association? So today, if I want to run a data science model or create a data science model, would I go to the faculty of IIT Bombay and collaborate with them, create a project and get it done through as a BTP? Probably too far-fetched. I mean, I probably lost myself at the first step. And I think until we do that academic industry collaboration, which is very, very easy to do if you're talking about many of the US universities, I think it will just ignite something that will be a start of something big. Of course, hundreds of hurdles would be there, but that will be my second big feedback, that how do we start industry academic collaboration, and then how do you do a student alumni collaboration?
Great. I hope when we have this discussion 2-3 years out, we would have built that ecosystem out with a lot of collaborative trust and then community aspects. So looking forward to that. So now moving on to audience questions. One question that's been recurring is, does one need to be an engineer or say, need to have financial expertise in order to start a fintech today? So what are your thoughts there?
I think I can talk for all of us. None of us were.
Yeah, we are all sitting here.
Yeah, we're all sitting here. I mean, none of us had a financial impact. I remember, when we decided to get into credit, I did not have any idea of what even the credit bureau means. I went to this head of HSBC credit cards who taught us credit for almost a week or so, said what underwriting is, said how this is how credit lines look like. We learned financial cash flows and everything from another mentor of ours who actually taught us how to actually read the balance sheet of an NBFC really, and what really is an ROA for an NBFC. So all of these terms we have learned, and that is what I think we all value together, is that given the right set of people that you work with and that hunger to learn can get you almost anywhere, whether it's tech or whether it's finance. It doesn't really matter. So yes, you don't need to have a background to do something in fintech.
There are tons of examples. Like you can take Ola also. You don't have to be knowing the cab business to actually run the cab business. So I'm sure the guy is like he's H5 only, Bhavesh. So, but he's running a successful cab business in the country right now. The biggest one.
And
It's just that what you need to understand the set of problems, that what are you trying to solve, and how will you solve it. But eventually, the journey you will learn things. I think it is a very common example for all of us. Lecture notes. So you need to you should know that your exams are going to come. So you need to get hold of your lecture notes. So you will learn how to like understand those notes in 2 to 3 days.
Great. So other question we have is fintech platforms and more typical of investment platforms. They ask a lot of data around to evaluate risk, right? Around Aadhaar, income details, etc. So as a founder, how do you build trust when you build a fintech platform, and what is the playbook to be able to do that, right? So that's another question.
I think in every research that you do about lending, I think the before rate or amount or experience, the first thing that comes as something that consumers feel that lenders do not exhibit is trust. So clearly, I mean, there's so much to be done there, and I think it's not a one fintech activity. It is an industry activity. In fact, it so happens that if one fintech was to get hacked or was to use data in a very unmeaningful way, I think the entire industry gets the blame. So I think it's a collective exercise that everybody needs to do. There is, I mean, at Flexi Loans, we try to do a lot of things to exhibit that trust. Not enough, I must say, but things like not utilizing that data for any other activity, not cross-selling it to other partners. We in fact work with players like Flipkart, Amazon, Pine Labs to lend to their SME networks, and these are all pretty serious tech companies scaled to a point where they want to ring fence the customer, but also protect the customer interests. And so we have policies where we actually destroy data after a period of time and not keep it in our databases, even for model building purposes. The whole typically when you're building tech infrastructure, the concepts of anonymization, the concepts of encryption, they come in very late in the startup's journey. And there are some trigger points when it happens. Typically, when you're working with some large companies, or where there's an RBI audit, or there is somebody who wants to evaluate you from a due diligence perspective, and that's where you start talking about these things. So, but that's it, right? I mean, consent-based architecture, I am actually not a big fan of. Okay, because I think consent in India means very different than me actually knowing what are you going to do with my data. When you say that I'm going to use your lat long on the phone, are you going to do that 100 times a day, or are you going to do that 2 times a day? I think those boundaries are very, very blurred. So there are things that we need to do to protect customer interests from a privacy perspective, where I think a lot more innovation needs to be done. The things where a lot of progress has happened, which is on the data management and data protection piece. And that's where I think we have not seen any big setbacks from a trust perspective. But I think you could spend one more day at the conference just talking about how to build trust with customers.
Great. So we also have questions from a few students. A lot of engineering colleges today do not have an avenue where students can learn financial services or fintech really. So how should they go about it? Do they necessarily have to go to a US, or let's say institutes like IITs, right? So what happens beyond that, and how does that awareness really happen at college levels?
So the question is that, are there undergraduate courses specializing on fintech?
Yes.
I think fintech as a vertical does not really need a full-time course, because there are so many different elements to it. But there are courses which help you specialize in fintech. I've seen a few. PwC runs this Uday initiative with campuses. Where and I contribute to that course, so I know that it's being run not in IITs but in many other colleges. There are fintech specialization courses coming up by institutes like Upgrad, and they're also building this. Also, I think there's enough literature around. If you just have to break down the fintech problem statement and forget the tech coding part of it, then it's about understanding the basic financials, the contours of risk, compliance, collections. In today's world, I do believe that courses should not be a bottleneck for learning. Degree is not what you need to be a fintech specialist. You can just start with Google, and then reach out to entrepreneurs like us. We're always willing to help talk, understand concepts. We've also learned it the hard way, so we might as well show it off a little bit. And I think that will be the easiest and the cheapest way.
Yeah, I think that's rightly said. I think we need to break it down into technology and finance. Technology, I think the core building concepts are already there in terms of data science or machine learning or vision, which are the core building principles for, I think, not only finance but a lot of other technology, other products also. In terms of information on finance, definitely there are a lot of case studies done. In fact, one of our investors, Exine Labs, so they have a lot of case studies like worldwide, in ranging from South America to Africa and obviously India, and where they state the actual customer base and their problems and how different fintechs in the world are solving those. So hundreds of case studies. Obviously, as we discussed in one of our earlier questions, once we expand that sphere, and also Abhishek said that once we expand that sphere, how to link the current students to the mentors in the fintech industry, that will also bridge the gap. Like, people can directly ask questions, and I think we will be there to answer.
Great. So then, in the interest of time, we'll be taking one more question, which is really that what skills should one learn if they want to apply to a fintech company, given they have no prior experience in finance?
I think the percentage of people who we hired in our company who had a prior experience of finance should be less than 2%. I think it will mostly maybe our CFO and a few other people who are actually handling the financial operations, but everybody else, the engineering team, that is more technology focused. So I think again we'll have to break it down.
I think what fintech really needs is that, given this country has so many challenges in the financial services play, and it's a massive industry, right? Finance, insurance, lending, and within that, multiple market segments. You just need people who could think fresh and question the core assumptions. And if you're just able to do that, you will add a lot of value. Right from customer service to customer experience to the market segment you're going after, structuring the product that you need to give to the right customer segment. There's so much that needs to be done, which does not really require a financial services experience really in the fintech domain per se. So I think that's where you need those creative minds who could question those assumptions really.
Yeah, I think so. We have this 2 factors in our recruitment questionnaire that every manager has to fill when they're interviewing someone, and that's curiosity index and creativity index. Okay, if any candidate displays high amount of curiosity, they may not know the answers, but they want to know the answers, and a little bit of out-of-the-box thinking and creativity, because that's important for us to solve a problem in a different way. Rest everything is just trainable.
Great.
Yeah, like innovation does not that you have to win a Nobel Prize for it.
Yeah,
it can be very, very small. In fact, I can give a very concrete example. Not from not just engineering, but even one of our collection person who we hired. What he did, one of the issues which we faced in collection is that language problem is a lot. Like, when you're talking to the customer, he comes back saying, okay, I don't know English, I don't know Hindi, say I know Gujarati, I know Odia, right? What that guy did, he wrote all the collection messages in all the languages. He wrote it in English. Like, if somebody's saying that I'm in Odia, he will write that whole phrase in Odia, in English. So even if the guy says that I don't understand a language, he will just read it through as it is. At least I'm able to communicate the message to the end customer. Now I also consider that as a true innovation at a very small scale, but that's innovation.
And that's true. I'm going to steal that, Vinay.
Yes,
Yeah,
seriously,
absolutely.
it's a
Absolutely.
very good playbook that you have on this.
So, but not everybody did that. He did that, and this is a very small innovation where I think you can save time and these kind of innovations are applicable to all the departments in the company. You don't have to necessarily know the tidbits of finance.
Great. So with that, we come to the end of the panel. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for being so raw, so real. And I'm sure a lot of students, young professionals have taken a lot from this. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them actually go ahead and start a fintech startup after this panel. So thank you so much for joining us today.
And you invest in them, Chirag. That's what they're looking for.
Great. Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, guys.